give us a couple of seconds. We're just trying to go live on YouTube as well. Okay, let's get started. In the meantime, so we are not wasting people's time. Okay, let me share my screen. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We have, as you are aware, we started last week a series on managing emotional well-being during the pandemic. And a lot of us are feeling very anxious. It could be the risk of infection for ourselves or a family member. It could be about a friend or a family going through COVID. Uh, for a lot of it, for a lot of us, it's causing sleepless nights. We may be in the midst of it, or we may be distant from our families, and it also adds to our stress. So we have here with us once again Hvovi Bhagwagar, who is an experienced psychologist and who's been on our uh, as a panelist on our webinars a few times. Last week, we talked about doom scrolling and how to handle negative news onslaught. And if you missed it, you can find the recording on our Facebook page or the YouTube page. We also discussed the same topic in Hindi on Thursday with Snigdha Mishra. Again, if you know somebody who would prefer to listen to in Hindi, then we will be discussing the same topic that we're doing today on anxiety with the Snigdha in Hindi on Thursday, which is day after tomorrow. And as always, a quick guidance to our attendees. The information that is being discussed is, not to be treated as medical advice. And if you have specific emotional well-being issues or mental health issues, please do consult a specialist. This session is being recorded, and if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can post your comments on the live feed. And as always, you can write to us at editor@patientsengage.com and follow us on our social media pages. We are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Let's get started because we are trying to keep it really focused. And Hvovi, we are all feeling very anxious and we are in this constant state of heightened anxiety and worry. Uh, is this a normal or natural response?
I'll just start with first by saying thank you again for having me on the platform and hello to everyone watching. Now, is anxiety normal? There are researchers who said it's endemic, which means that anxiety is pretty much the most regular thing that could happen in a viral pandemic like this. I remember the words of Viktor Frankl. Some of you may be knowing about him. He was the Jewish psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. And he has talked about how you can move from a crisis and yet remain human. So he says that an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is a normal reaction. And that's what I want to just, put out there, that if you don't feel yourself, if you don't feel like something is happening to you which doesn't seem to be the same as how it was 2 months ago, your body and mind don't seem to be doing the same things as they were, it's normal because of the situation we are in, the shared trauma that we all are facing and have been experiencing. And it's not necessary that you have yourself undergone a difficult situation to feel anxious. You could be feeling anxious just by hearing things around you, by viewing what's happening when you open your television screen or you open a news item to read. So again, I'm going to say it's endemic. It's part of human survival because our brains are geared towards survival than any other type of threat. So if there's any threat to our survival, we automatically react with some level of anxiety. And let's call it preparedness. We react with some level of preparedness.
Right.
And in this pandemic, I think more than the first wave, Aparna, what we are seeing is that there is a real threat somewhere to our physical survival.
Correct.
It's definitely, if we look at the first wave, it was a ripple compared to what we're seeing today in India. I'm talking
Hmm.
of India.
Right.
So the threat to our life, threat to the health of our loved ones, uh, all of these things are really, really important. And we have to keep following new guidelines which change all the time. We don't know what kind of medical care is the right or the wrong one. So,
Right.
yes, it's a time for anxiety, and it's also a time to recognize it and work with it.
So when you say that to recognize it and work with it, how would we, you know, how would we recognize it and what do we need to do to work with it?
So, firstly, anxiety in itself is not bad.
Mm.
As I said, to some extent, normal anxiety lies on one end of the spectrum. And
Right.
this can present as some form of apprehension and usually will take us towards some form of problem solving. So we're going
Right.
to try and find a solution because that anxiety kind of gears us up. It releases neurotransmitters in our brain that help us reach there and solve problems. Let me take a non-pandemic related example. Your exams,
Mm.
right? That's where we say that students who are completely relaxed actually don't perform as well as students who have a moderate level of anxiety. So
Right.
that's why they say, don't go into an exam overconfident. That's what we remember all our teachers and our parents saying. That's because anxiety is healthy. Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
if we have some level of anxiety, it kind of keeps us prepared. So for example, we are thinking, oh, what about if somebody in the family gets the virus, or if I
Mm.
get the virus?
Mm.
So let me be a little more careful when I go out. Let me leave the
Right.
house lesser. Let me mask better. Let me follow the masking guidelines that have been released. This is all anxiety, but it's healthy.
Right.
Now,
Right.
that's one spectrum of the anxiety. And then when we go across the spectrum, we go towards obviously the other end where anxiety can become a clinical level of a problem. So from an emotion, then it becomes a disorder. From
Right.
a healthy emotion that helps us survive and helps us stay prepared, it then becomes a diagnosable anxiety disorder. So I'm just going to throw out some terms that many of you may have heard about: phobias, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, panic disorder. These are forms of anxiety disorder. And diagnosing them is, of course, up to a mental health professional. But you need to understand that in a country like ours, you may be shocked and surprised to know that we have a very large proportion of people diagnosed with or suffering from anxiety disorders but not receiving the help that they
Mm.
need.
Mm.
So there was the study that was done in 2017 called the Global Burden of Diseases Study, which says that more than 44 million people in India have anxiety disorders, but 80% of them don't reach out for help
Right.
or don't because they're not even aware that they need to reach out for help. So
Right.
we probably will find a higher proportion after the pandemic. That's unfortunate, but it will be short term. However, what are some things you need to look for? I think
Mm.
that's important.
Correct.
So
Correct.
when does anxiety start crossing over into place where you probably need help? The first thing is watch for functionality. By functionality, I mean, are you able to do your daily life activities fairly okay? That means are you able to get out of bed, do the regular routine activities? If you
Mm.
work, then are you able to attend meetings? Are you able to make decisions? Are you able to keep up with the home chores? So if your
Right.
functionality is fine, I'm not
Mm.
saying that you need to be like on top of your game every day, but at least you are not spending the entire day in bed or avoiding meetings or avoiding meeting people, then somewhere or the other, it's fine. You're on the
Right.
okay spectrum.
Right.
Another thing to watch for is how many days of bad sleep have you had?
Mm.
So we know that when there is anxiety, then sleep tends to get affected the most because the neurotransmitter serotonin is impacted by stress and anxiety. So if you
Right.
have difficulty falling asleep many nights in a row,
Mm.
or you find that you have something called middle insomnia, that is, you fall asleep but wake up around 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning and you don't get a full night's rest. And this
Right.
is happening for many days in a row. That's another sign that you need to be thinking about. Now, if you think pandemic related, people who probably qualify as having more clinical levels of anxiety will constantly cling to COVID related news. They'll be the
Right.
people who, we talked about doom scrolling last time, they would be most prone to doing that. Maybe keeping their TV sets on the whole day tuned into a news channel,
Right.
or
Right.
constantly reading up about news. I have my clients who tell me that if they're working on their laptops, they have one tab open constantly that's giving them updates about what's happening around the
Mm.
coronavirus around the world and in India.
Right. Right.
That's yeah, that's
That's
I
a
would say
sign.
a sign, and it's unfortunate because it's kind of helping the brain feed into the anxiety more. It's not reducing the anxiety.
Right.
Person
Right.
is trying to do that to get some certainty, but
Right.
the opposite is happening. Also,
Right.
another sign is if the person is feeling anxious but is doing the opposite of what anxiety should be making the person do, which is seek out some ways to reduce the anxiety. So, taking active steps, for example, looking after savings or investments, making sure you have all the medication at home you require immediately. These are active, productive steps. But if you're
Right.
doing the opposite, you're avoiding thinking about a doctor, avoiding keeping the name of a hospital or an oxygen supplier, or thinking about what are the steps you can do if somebody starts having symptoms in the family, then that's a typical sign of over anxiety. And people
Right.
with anxiety disorders typically avoid productive action. They don't move into it. So
Right.
that's
Right.
another very strong signal that mental health professionals look for when they're diagnosing a condition.
So when you're trying to avoid taking any steps.
Absolutely.
Right. Right.
That's what gets missed out by a lot of people. And people with anxiety think that they're taking steps by reading information or by continuously calling someone and talking to them, but they're not taking productive steps. For
Right.
example, keeping a family doctor in the loop about a symptom is far more productive than calling 10 of your relatives and talking to them and asking, oh, in your house, when this one got COVID, what happened? Then calling a
Right.
second person up and say, okay, so if in your house this one got COVID, what happened?
Right.
These are
Right.
the unproductive things. So that's going to happen. And if you call 10 people, 10 people tell you different things, your anxiety shoots up.
Right. So somebody wrote to us about how their neighbor was kind of locking themselves up in the house, right? And they would um, they 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 did not open the windows, they did not open the door, they just locked themselves up. Would that be considered an extreme case of anxiety as well?
Absolutely correct. Because people who are anxious, they're not reacting to the realities of the situation. And the realities of the situation are that if you have cross
Bhavi, can
ventilation,
you again got to request for you to speak up a little louder?
can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah,
Better?
yes, better. Thanks.
Okay, so people who are anxious are not responding to the realities of the situation. And
Right,
the reality or what are the public health measures that have been propagated is cross ventilation.
right,
So if this person is actually reading the right stuff or doing the right things, then closing the doors is the last thing you should do because the virus tends to propagate faster in those closed
in those closed
environments.
doors. Correct,
So this
correct.
is a typical example of somebody with anxiety, as also somebody who, and I've spoken about this on your show earlier, someone who will take public health measures to the extreme,
Right,
especially around sanitizing. So they will
correct.
sanitize every item coming into the house
Right, right,
with soap water, to the
right.
extent of actually creating ill health for
Hmm.
themselves and other people in the family. These are typical signs of anxiety.
Okay. And if you do either in yourself or you typically would observe in some, a family member or a friend or a loved one, um, what should, how should you, what should your next step be?
So if you observe these things I'm talking about the extreme anxiety. If you
Right.
observe these things, the first thing you should do is, of course, call your general practitioner. If you don't know
Hmm.
what to do, then you can call your general practitioners. GPs, that is family physicians or general practitioners, are usually the gateway to advise you what to do.
Right. Right.
So typically call them up and ask them whether these are signs that require you to meet a mental health professional.
Hmm.
If at all you feel that the person is definitely displaying signs and you don't know whom to call, what mental health professional to approach. So, Aparna, I'll just interject here. What happens is people wait too long because
Right.
they have read online that you have to wait for a good psychiatrist or a good
Hmm.
psychologist.
Hmm.
And that is where really a huge mess up in mental health happens. So, my constant public appeal is call up your nearest hospital.
Right.
They will have a
Right.
psychiatrist on board. They will most probably have a clinical psychologist also on board,
Hmm.
right? Call them up and seek an appointment
Right.
and help your family member go there and at least get a consultation. If not, on nowadays everything's on video calls, so you're going to get a consult much faster. Make
Correct.
sure you can do that before you jump to any conclusions.
Right.
I
Right.
think it is extremely important that if you feel the anxiety is reaching an out of proportion place, the person is going to require professional help.
So, one of the things that people often do is that, especially if sleep is affected, their tendency is to deal with sleep issue as a symptom, right? So, they will take a sleeping pill or at best get that prescribed. And if you don't need a prescription, they self medicate on that. Um, does that help or is that counterproductive?
It is counterproductive because most of the time sleep is, as you said, a symptom.
Hmm.
uh, the tranquilizers that you're going to get over the counter are not catered to the specific condition you have. When you visit
Right.
a mental health professional, what they will prescribe for you is going to be a combination of the symptoms you have. Sleep is one of them. You may have muscle tension. You may have other physiological problems. You may have racing thoughts, palpitations. You may have other forms of anxiety. And so
Hmm.
you will be given a medication that will help the whole spectrum. But
Right.
if you are only helping one aspect of the spectrum and not the rest, you're creating problems in the future, which is where psychiatrists also have issues because a
Hmm.
person has been self medicating. And then when the rest of the symptoms haven't been addressed, they get into a much worse shape.
Right.
So it's important that definitely please don't seek over the counter medication and just pop it. Now with the new FDA norms, you don't get OTC, sleep medications or benzodiazepines easily. But people still have chemists who authorize the
Correct.
stuff, and you
Correct.
also get a lot of medication in the name of, what's it called? Um, uh, when you have to jet lag.
Hmm.
A lot of medication for jet lag
Right.
is sold over the counter, which is actually mild forms of sleep medication.
Exactly. Yeah.
So these are easily available, and people then take them and mess things up. So honestly, don't do that. If you don't feel comfortable going to a psychiatrist, many people feel that's like the deep end of stuff, then
Right.
at least reach out to a counselor. So
Right.
they'll guide you whether you really require to meet a psychiatrist or no.
Right. So we've got one question which kind of links to that, right? Person is talking of insomnia and anxiety. Again, how to, I guess, best way to get out of it completely, as well as the fear. So I think fear and anxiety is currently kind of going hand in hand, right? As far as because of the COVID situation we are in.
Right.
Um, so again, are there steps that people can take? If it's a aggressive form, maybe they do need to get to a counselor or get to a psychiatrist. But is there an intermediate level which they can try and do a few steps on their own and address it?
Absolutely. In fact, even when you are in therapy or you meet a psychiatrist, many of these steps would also be healthy to take
Hmm.
alongside.
Right.
But let me caution people that self help is no substitute for a professional's help.
Hmm.
So be cautious about using and adapting these measures to your daily life and
Right.
thinking you're going to get better. An anxiety disorder oftentimes will only get better with good intervention. But what are some things to do if your anxiety is very acute? By acute, I mean it's just started. And
Hmm.
you're aware that before this, you didn't feel this way, but you
Right.
started feeling it, say, after an event.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
you had to struggle really hard to get medical care. Maybe you had somebody in the family, and God forbid, something really drastic was about to happen to them. and you
Right.
started experiencing these hyper alert symptoms. And here are some of the things you can do. What
Hmm.
happens with anxiety is, so anxiety is typically an emotion, right?
Right.
And we have a cycle of emotions, thoughts, and behaviors that run around, making
Hmm.
us humans tick, sort of like an internal clock. So
Right.
when we have anxiety, our typical thoughts are catastrophic.
Right.
Oh, it's going to be this bad, or
Hmm.
this is the worst that's going to happen. And I'm sure it's going to happen. That's what
Right.
anxiety keeps saying. So, catastrophic thoughts, the behavior is typically either extreme approach. The example I
Right.
gave earlier, calling up 10 people to ask, did this happen to you? Did this also happen to you?
Hmm.
That's approach behavior, or extreme avoidance. I don't want to
Right.
talk to anyone. I don't want to meet anyone. I don't want to see anything. And now, here is where a little bit of your own changing of perspective can help. So for the
Right.
group that's engaging in a lot of approach behavior, that
Hmm.
means trying to do everything to make sure the situation is under control. The examples I was giving earlier of people sanitizing everything
Correct.
and
Correct.
trying really hard to make sure they never get COVID and they never get infected. So they're
Right.
trying to eliminate uncertainty. So anxious people tend to do that, right? Make sure our environment is so protected and so sanitized that we've eliminated all uncertainty.
Right.
What people don't recognize is that the number of possible actions we can do towards prevention is far
Right.
more than we can calculate. Just think of the number of things we could do. I mean, we probably fill up Excel sheets after Excel sheets. So
Hmm.
how, if there are so many permutations and combinations to staying safe, how do we act on all of them? So we
Right.
can't eliminate all uncertainty, and that's the biggest mantra to follow when we have a pandemic.
Right. Right.
Uncertainty is a part of our lives today, and it is going to remain a part of our lives for some time. And a healthy amount of it is okay to live with, right?
Right.
But
Right.
so we have to stay cautious. We cannot go to the other extent of eliminating uncertainty. So the first thing I would say is just follow simple rules. Mask, yeah,
Hmm.
wear your N95 if you're going in a crowded place where there are too many people. Double masking has been recommended. Sanitize wisely, not the
Right.
kind of sanitizing that drives you and other people in your family bonkers. um, get vaccinated if it's available for you. Avoid crowds. So keep
Right.
it simple. This is all that is in your control.
Hmm.
This much is what you can do. The
Right.
rest is also in your control, some part of it. Staying optimistic, trying engaging in daily life activities, trying to make sure you're meeting your deadlines, doing all
Right.
the things like taking care of your health. All of these things are in your control. What is not in your control, make sure you just pay as little attention to that as you can in the day. What the government is doing, for example, the way the virus is panning out in other parts of the country,
Right.
vaccinations being available or not. There are a lot of things not in our control today.
Right. Right.
Feeling angry about them is valid, but expecting to control those things so that your life can get better,
Hmm.
not in your hands. So that's another thing that feeds anxiety.
Right. Right.
Many people believe everything will be fine with the government and then
Hmm.
I'm going to be okay, my anxiety will go away. That
Right.
unfortunately doesn't happen. A few other tips that I'd suggest, again, keeping things very simple. Start the day with a simple sensory orientation exercise. So when you wake
Hmm.
up, three things that you can see around you. Uh,
Right.
it could be the clock, it could be your window curtains, it could be a glass of water next to you. So,
Right.
what are the three things? And I'll tell you why I'm saying this. You can also think about what are the sounds I'm hearing around me. So, as soon as you wake up, it takes about 30 seconds to a minute to do this. This
Right.
sensory orientation starts your thinking brain coming in action, because a lot of anxious people are most anxious the first half an hour after waking up.
Right. Right.
And what they do in that first half an hour is try to again eliminate uncertainty, read news, talk to
Hmm.
people,
Right.
get jittery, and the entire day goes in that. So the sensory orientation basically gets the thinking brain working, what we call the cortex. And as soon as you can start having a more, you can say, oriented way of looking at the world, your anxiety automatically drops. So that's a simple tip, but very scientific. if you're going to
Right.
see the way the brain operates.
Operates. Right.
And
Right.
other things that you can do through the day are what people have been talking about constantly: engage in some mindfulness,
Hmm.
spend time doing simple activities. I suggest to a lot of people that we've forgotten about playing board games, we've
Hmm.
forgotten about playing cards, and all those simple things, snakes and ladders, Ludo. Engage in simple activities.
Right.
Don't
Right.
try to do too much. The times of Dalgona coffee are gone now, which was the first wave.
First wave.
The sari challenge and Dalgona coffee. We really are in a crisis right now, and we have to be in a state of preparedness, but not in a state of anxiety.
Right.
Scientists
Right.
say alertness is okay, anxiety is not, or over anxiety is not. Be
Right.
alert, be prepared, do all the things that make your day as normal as they can, and yet stay ready. Be medically prepared.
Right.
And as I
Right.
was mentioning earlier, make sure that you have some level of contacts with you that you can immediately approach in case family members fall sick. Keep medications at home, keep a doctor's number, hospital, etc.,
Right.
etc.
Right. Right. One other question. So, this is what you need to do for yourself, right? But supposing you have a family member who is extremely anxious, is constantly in this state of worrying about everything that's happening, or uh, trying to sanitize everything, or, as you said, talking to five different people. How can you uh, support that person, as well as in some sense not get affected by that person as well, because sometimes just that constant interaction with that person can be quite challenging as well.
So I'm going to say two things here, and both are contradictory. The
Hmm.
first is you will get affected, and second is you have to make sure you're not too affected.
Hmm.
So if you have somebody who has an anxiety, let's not even use the word disorder, but let's say high
Correct.
levels of anxiety.
Right.
The problem is the person is happy in their world, because they have tried to eliminate in their mind all the uncertainty around them. The issue is that their family members get affected badly because
Hmm.
they are expected to do the same things that this person is doing. So the advice I always give people is that if you have someone with anxiety in the family, you have to
Hmm.
negotiate and fight your
Right.
battles. Choose your battles wisely rather.
Right.
So if you
Right.
can let go of a few things, let go of them. It's not the end of the world, right?
Hmm.
But if something that they are doing is going to deeply impact people in the family, like I know of people who have made elderly in the family drink boiled water through the day, something like
Right.
4 liters and 5 liters. In Corona nahi hoga fir.
Right.
But you can imagine how for an elderly, elderly person going through that is traumatic. So you have to
Hmm.
set boundaries somewhere,
Right.
and by
Right.
boundaries, I don't mean screaming and shouting, but laying a kind of a simple rule that some things are okay and some things are not.
Hmm.
And another thing is to recognize that this is anxiety. This is not the person.
Right.
It's their anxiety speaking. It's where they are trying to pacify themselves by trying to take care of all of these things around them. Also, if this goes away, their anxiety dissipates over time in the
Hmm.
next month or so, then don't worry about it. If it continues longer than that, then really think about seeking professional help.
Right. Right.
Because the problem that is that the person suffers, but
Hmm.
alongside every individual that they are in contact with on a daily basis also suffer.
Right.
Professional
Right.
help is always advisable in such cases.
Right. Okay. Just to everybody listening, if you have any final questions, we have another couple of minutes. So we have taken a couple of questions that have come in, but if there's anybody who would like to add a question, you can post it on the feed. Um, all right. And for what you're saying essentially is that, look, anxiety, or being in some state of worry at this point is natural response to what we are going through, but we should watch out for you know kind of extreme uh, symptoms, as well as if it starts to affect our daily functioning. And I think what you're also saying is that if it dissipates over time, because the crisis that we are in kind of reduces over time, then it's good. But if it, if the person continues to be in this heightened state of anxiety when the crisis is, we're past the crisis, then they should also, seek help, right?
Absolutely. I would say that because of the way things have been the last 6 weeks in this country, it would be difficult to find somebody who is not anxious right
Right,
now.
right.
So it is, like I said, it's endemic. It's pretty much normal. If it continues beyond this, once things
Mm,
are a little settled down in your city, let's
right,
say in the person's immediate vicinity, things are a little more settled down, but their anxiety is continuing. Sleep
right,
problems, hypervigilance, constantly trying to sanitize, not allowing others to, go beyond the boundary of the home. These
right,
are, the person needs help,
right.
right?
One question: does meditation help in the long run?
Mm.
I think maybe you can answer short run and long run.
Does meditation help? My God, this is one of the questions which is a minefield for me. I'll try and answer it as simply as I can.
Mm,
One is meditation is not one size fits all, right?
mm,
I can't say that I will wear my friend's clothes and it is going to fit me perfectly okay, just like that, right?
mm,
Meditation is unfortunately so tom-tommed and so kind of, I think, overblown in the media.
right.
I'd say be careful. If you are, first caution is if you are on any psychotropic medication, you have
Mm,
been visiting a psychiatrist and you are on any kind of medication that the psychiatrist is giving you, don't do meditation. Your
mm,
psychiatrist will advise you when it is okay to start it. Follow your
right,
psychiatrist's guidance. Depending
right,
on what stage of treatment you are in, meditation could be beneficial or not to you.
right,
If you're
right.
not on a psychiatrist's medication, uh, you have to do or start meditation very, very gradually.
Mm,
In fact, start it off with mindfulness.
mm,
You have apps these days that talk to you about simply staying in the environment, which is mindfulness, rather
mm,
than closing your eyes and going into your sort of into a deep meditative state, which can be non-beneficial to somebody who's highly anxious. First of all,
right.
they'll not be able to stay in that state longer than a few seconds.
Mm,
So in the short term and the long term, this is not beneficial to them. They probably do it
right.
once or twice and give up on it.
Correct, correct.
Instead, gradually step it up. When you do a mindfulness exercise, all it tells you is to stay in the present moment, watch your breath, check how your body feels right now.
Right,
Um, for example, check how do you feel sitting in this chair. That's mindfulness.
right.
And those are gradual ways in which you're going to start slowly getting your body accustomed to staying still.
Mm,
Then you can step it up to meditation under guidance. But please don't jump into it and say, I will meditate for half an hour, and you've never done that all your life. You're probably going to go into a trance state or a dissociative state. Not
right,
recommended. You're not doing anything for your mental health there.
right. And I think also don't get too disappointed if you can't meditate. I think we find people who try it out and then they, get very yeah, disappointed, upset with themselves for not being able to do it. Uh,
And a lot of people who come to me, clients, the first thing they say is, if you're going to tell me to meditate, I'm out of here. Because
right.
that's the
They've
number
tried.
one world advice, right? World's number one advice, meditate.
Correct,
And
correct.
anyone who is highly anxious or depressed, it's
Mm,
not easy for them to do it, and they feel so socially outcast because every friend is saying, oh, I meditate half an hour a day and I feel so amazing.
right,
But it's it's not for everyone.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are, kind of, as I say, it's meditative or mindful activities sometimes are better than trying to meditate, at least, in the learning stages.
And if you have access to technology, then download a good mindfulness app, and you'll see that if you do it for 5 minutes, notice the difference it makes.
Right, right,
When you're feeling better, you can always try meditation very gradually. That's all I'll say.
right. Okay. Thank you, Havovi, and thank you to our audience. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover in the next few weeks, please do let us know. Leave a comment, or send us a message on Messenger or on our email. Um, but yeah, do let us know if there's something that's bothering you, or you would like us to address. We plan to do this, as I said, as a series, and we're doing the Hindi version of this on Thursday with Snigdha Mishra. So look forward to people joining us there. And stay safe wherever you are.